Chapter 1203. Roughly 300 miles away from the imperial city. Qing Xian stood in the clouds and looked in the direction of the imperial capital with interest. Although he was here, no one was able to detect his divine sense sweeping through the area. Weird, how weird! This Zhong Shou's cultivation should have reached God realm. However, why is this 6-god defensive knife technique so strong? A Saint realm cultivator can't even fight back. Isn't that a little too much? Tai Wang brushed his beard and took in a deep breath. This 6-god defensive knife technique is similar to a flying knife technique that I have seen before. I heard that it came from a book from another world. I sent people to search for it, but they didn't find anything. This item has already fallen into the hands of a player. Logically speaking, it shouldn't be so strong. Based on my deductions, this flying knife technique needs to be paired with a special knife artifact to be 100% strong. No matter how he thought about it, he couldn't understand. Tai Wang placed down such thoughts and smiled. Does senior brother suspect that Li Bieshua's weird actions have something to do with this? I am not suspecting, but I am sure. I just don't know what it is. Is it a pill? Is it an artifact? Or is it some natural treasure? It is tough to confirm. Qing Xian shook his head and his expression changed. It seems like we need to use the unveil spirit slaughtering formation. Unveil death flame lightning, spirit slaughtering godlight. With an end realm in charge, as long as Xiuguan doesn't attack, Li Bieshua will be in an undefeatable position. Speaking of which, we haven't seen the top-killing formation of the demon path in a few thousand years. Tai Huang's expression changed slightly. No formation in the world could cross the end realm unless it was of that level. The common people's 7 swords could go up against end realm experts because of the 7 swords combination, pushing the sword to the god weapon level. The reason why the Kenzo sect's fulling sword formation was able to suppress the luck of the Kenzo sect was because of the sword formation. This was because its main sword, the floating spirit, was a rare godly weapon in itself. Similar to End Realm, the artifact spirit relied on the Tao and couldn't be destroyed. The demon path's 9 heavens and 10 earth unveil spirit slaughtering formation also had a god treasure suppressing it. With Li Bieshua in charge, normal End Realm experts wouldn't be able to shake it. If that's the case, Zhong Shou will definitely die if those people don't make a move? It won't be that easy. If I'm not wrong, Zhong Shou definitely has the ability to save his life. Or maybe that god-refined sword had already leveled up. But it's really strange. Qing Xian glanced around curiously, and the suspicion in his eyes grew stronger as he said, "My divine will has swept across the land within 10,000 miles of this place, but I can only sense the traces of Wei Su and Yuanjing. As for that Xiuguan, his cultivation is higher than yours and mine, so he has a way to hide himself. But why were Long Ying and Lin Xuanshuang also nowhere to be seen? Our 2 End Realm Saint Venerables, a common people's sword formation, and a Xiuguan who is nowhere to be seen going up against the 12 copper men and the 9 heavens and 10 earth unveil spirit slaughtering demon formation?" Tai Wang also felt that it was weird, but he couldn't say anything. At this moment, he could only wait and see. As for that Zhu Shi, he is in charge of the Confucian Temple. It seems like he is really prepared to interfere. The 9 heavens and 10 earth unveil spirit slaughtering demon formation needs to absorb the essence, energy, and blood of 23 million people in the imperial capital. 23 million people, 1 year of lifespan can maintain the formation for 3 hours. Till now, he has no intentions of stopping it. It seems like this Confucian faction Saint Venerable is really determined. Even if he has to work with demons, he will kill the demon in his heart. He sighed, but there was a hint of mockery in his tone. Qingming, who was not far away, had a solemn expression as she bowed towards the 2 of them. Zhong Shou is asking to die, his luck is already gone. If the 2 of you help, he won't be able to leave the imperial capital alive. Tai Huang smiled when he heard this, but he didn't say anything. Kunming was the third End-Realm Saint Venerable of the Taoist faction, and he had also died to save hundreds of thousands of Taoist faction disciples. This was why he loved Kunming's daughter so much. He also knew that Qingming's hatred towards Zhong Shou was as deep as an ocean, which was why even if she said something wrong, he wouldn't scold her. Qing Xian shook his head. Let's wait and see. If there is a chance, I won't sit and watch. In front of him, if there were no other variables, even if he didn't do anything, Zhong Shou would definitely die. However, it was precisely this unpredictable variable that caused people to have misgivings. Zhong Shou wouldn't suddenly go crazy, and Song Xingdao definitely wouldn't be crazy. Maybe Xiuguan really returned and had some way to go up against the 12 copper men. This was why before he saw the situation clearly, he definitely wouldn't attack. Stepping into the Fenghua Palace, Zhong Shou noticed the dark and rainy sky. The originally dark and gloomy color had turned blood red. At this moment, beneath the ground, one could feel large amounts of Yin power flowing and pulsing. As expected, it was Yin vein spirit slaughtering. Zhong Shou didn't care and continued forwards. At this moment, Yin Yu and Li Bieshue should have gathered all the Yin veins within 10,000 miles into the palace. There were also the 23 million people in the city, their vital energy. However, so what? As for Yin Yu, the ruler of the Taishang, the lord of the imperial capital, he wasn't willing to comment on him. At this moment, the various gates of the Fenghua Palace were locked. The restrictions of the palace protecting formation were everywhere. The spiritual energy was also extremely abundant. Along with the geography of the palace, it was maintained at its peak. Zhong Shou was too lazy to break the restrictions one by one, directly forcefully tearing them down. He used the Xian increasing law containing wings to buff the 3,000 star falling ability. The star Dao seeds spread out and covered 10,000 feet of land around him. All the restrictions that came into contact with it were forcefully smashed before they could even activate. Those buildings were also affected, struck by the exploding spiritual energy, and were all destroyed. Wherever Zhong Shou passed, those spacious halls and beautiful buildings were all turned into rubble. None of them were left intact. Just as Zhong Shou entered the Fenghua Palace, roughly 20,000 feet. Only then did Zhong Shou slow down. Only to see that all around had turned dark red. Numerous weird blood-colored spiritual lights gathered over. It caused Zhong Shou's hundreds of star Dao seeds to stop and be slightly obstructed. Not only the 3,000 star falling ability, but the 190 dragon tooth destruction swords were the same. The former was okay, the latter was more serious. Zhong Shou was unable to control some of the lower-grade swords with less spiritual nature. This is the 9 heavens and 10 lands spirit slaughtering Godlight? The so-called spirit slaughtering, as the name suggested, naturally meant the destruction of spiritual nature. It could wipe out the spiritual nature of all things in the world. There were millions of races, billions of beasts, and various artifact spirits within. It countered his 3,000 star falling and 10 extreme imperial Dao destruction sword formation. The former was formed from his heart image, and was buffed by the Xian increasing law containing wings, which was why it wasn't easy to destroy. Those dragon tooth swords didn't have such an ability. The spiritual sense that Zhong Shou hid within the sword body was greatly reduced in that instance. Naturally, this was also because these two abilities weren't fully formed. The 3 walls and 4 palaces of the 3,000 star falling weren't formed. The 10 main swords of the 10 extreme imperial Dao destruction sword formation weren't completed either. If not, it wouldn't have been broken so easily. Chapter 1204. Zhong Shou waved his hand and kept all the 3,000 great Dao stars and the dragon tooth Dao sword. After losing the outer layer of protection, the blood-red spiritual light gathered towards where he was standing at this moment. Zhong Shou instantly felt dizzy. The spirit slaughtering Godlight could blind one's mind. Even God Realm and Saint Realm cultivators were no exception. At this moment, his soul felt like its spirituality was being forcefully stripped away bit by bit. His soul ocean slowly calmed down like it had totally lost its life. Zhong Shou scoffed coldly and projected the black and white beginning and end Dharma behind his back. Only then did he feel better. The demon path sect protecting formation was huge. Now that Wushang Yuan demon Li Bieshue was personally suppressing it, its strength was indiscernible. Even as compared to the common people's vast habitat, the 10,000 celestial formation was just a little weaker. Although Zhong Shou's unlimited beginning and end ability had unlimited potential. However, before it truly entered Grade 13 Supreme, he was unable to swallow and convert all of the spirit slaughtering Godlight. There was still a small portion that could affect his soul. The Xian increasing law containing wings could increase the Xian law containing wings. However, at the same time, it could only be used on one ability, on one person. At this moment, he buffed the blade technique, so he couldn't raise the unlimited beginning and end ability. Luckily, the remaining portion was still within the range that he could go up against. He used the sword technique, and the God-refined sword rumbled and resonated with the other 6 swords within 100 miles. The common people's 7 swords instantly merged into one. The vast sword energy that was borrowed from the distance also pierced down, forcefully ripping open the blood-red sky and pressing down. Sweeping everything. 10,000 feet in front of Zhong Shou, all the buildings and palaces were smashed into dust under the impact of the tide-like sword energy. All of the restrictions, all of the obstacles were swept away. To be able to break into the unveil spirit slaughtering formation, your God-refined sword has actually risen to the God weapon level. A majestic and cold voice spread over along with the wind. The sound reverberated in all directions in this space, making it impossible to pinpoint its location. Zhong Shou raised his head and looked at the north side of the Fenghua Palace, at the 99-story stargazing tower. He only felt an extremely dangerous gaze staring at him with a bit of teasing and curiosity. Your flying dagger technique really does have the charm of slaying immortals and slaying God. Unfortunately, it was full of flaws. Only with the support of the Tao of heaven and earth could it have such divine might. In that case, you've already unsealed the profound increasing law containing wings? These words did not spread. They only sounded in Zhong Shou's ears. The sound waves brushed past and disappeared without a trace. Even if a holy venerate was right beside him, he would not be able to do anything. If one's cultivation was lower than Li Bieshue's, one would not be able to discern what he was talking about. Zhong Shou sneered. Interesting. So secretive and sneaky. Did this Wushang Yuan demon still have hopes for the wings? Just as Li Bieshue said this, numerous black lightning glows exploded out in all directions. Under the impact, the energy layer around Zhong Shou was like paper as it was forcefully ripped open and directly affected his body. However, most of it only left some marks on the surface of his body before dissipating. At this moment, only then did Zhong Shou feel that the month of pain and torture in the small 1,000 shards of the underground palace had benefited him greatly. Just his physical body alone was able to block a portion of the dark lightning strike. His injuries were healed in an instant. Ah, you actually have a Saint Realm undying body, close to the extreme. You really are blessed by the heavens. That majestic and dark voice rang out once more. Then, the black lightning that was about to dissipate suddenly changed. It actually turned into an ashen white death flame that charged at Zhong Shou's body once more. Extremely pure death energy instantly broke through Zhong Shou's body, protecting celestial power. It followed his chakra meridians and spread to various parts of his body, his organs, limbs, and bones. Zhong Shou was shocked. He tried to control it, and only then did he notice the death energy. Shockingly, it was extremely pure. Compared to the death energy he used to control with the Styx River Death Sword, it was a full 2 levels stronger. He was unable to control it at all. The moment it entered his body, the life force around his body started to dim. The movements of his internal organs were almost at a standstill as they slowly faded away. The internal heaven and earth that was circulating without any problems started to slow down and weaken. Zhong Shou's eyes were filled with shock before it recovered back to normal. As expected, if the 9 heaven and 10 earth vein spirit slaughtering formation didn't have such strength, it would be the most powerful formation in the world. How could it be called the top killing formation of the demon path, and cause End Realm experts to fear it? If it was a normal God Realm cultivator, he would have turned to dust. Life and death mysteries, heaven and earth reversal. Zhong Shou formed a spell and the death energy in his body started to change. It turned into pure life energy and nourished his meridians. The injuries caused by the death energy spreading all over his body were healed. Even the spirit slaughtering Godlight that entered his body was weakened by a lot. The wounds all over Zhong Shou's body healed up in just a moment. However, the death flame was just too huge and pure. It was so huge and pure that every bit that Zhong Shou converted, he found it really tough. Zhong Shou sucked in a cold breath. Actually, be it the spirit slaughtering Godlight or the Meridian death flame lightning, they were all destroyed. He used the common people's sword formation to wipe out half of them. Heavy sword energy was like a net that protected all around. A large portion of the spirit slaughtering Godlight and the Meridian death flame lightning were either destroyed or destroyed. Only a small portion was able to charge into his body. With the God-refined sword protecting him, it was like 4 End Realm cultivators protecting him. Even then, when Zhong Shou continued forwards, it was still tough for him to move forward. He only felt that each step he took required a lot of energy. In just 1,000 feet, Zhong Shou's forehead was covered in sweat. However, with the life energy from the life and death mysterious change, he wasn't totally exhausted. His spiritual sense locked onto the imperial reading room within the Fenghua Palace. Yu's aura was within his senses. This is the life and death transformation? That Meridian death flame lightning not only can't harm you, but it can also help you. What a wonderful divine ability. One has to say that you Zhong Shou are indeed the most talented person in the cloud world in 7,000 years. However, this 9 heavens and 10 earth Meridian spirit slaughtering killing formation isn't so simple. It was still that teasing tone. The owner of the voice seemed to treat Zhong Shou as a toy. The black lightning and the spirit slaughtering Godlight actually merged into one. When the dark red lightning exploded, this time it didn't just harm his physical body but also his soul. The ashen white death flame and the blood-red spirit slaughtering Godlight merged into one and charged into his soul ocean. It swept all about with his soul as the source and crazily burned. Zhong Shou only felt his soul explode, a huge wave raged within. His consciousness was dizzy and he nearly fell into it. Blood spurted out from his nose and mouth. After a long while, he managed to catch his breath. He activated the black and white beginning and end Dharma to suppress it. In his heart, his understanding of the vein spirit slaughtering killing formation rose by another level. Although this killing formation wasn't as strong as Tsang Shengdao's 10,000 celestial formation, it was comparable. He really underestimated it before, however. Li Bieshue's tone really annoyed him. Did this Wushang Yuan demon really think that Zhong Shou was meat on the chopping board and could be sliced up as he wished? Shaking his head, Zhong Shou still tried his best to spread out his spiritual sense. The key to today's battle was the 12 copper men. As long as his spiritual sense came into contact with the 12 copper men, he would be able to use the country protecting seal to control these copper men. He wouldn't need much time, just 100 breaths, and he would be able to totally control them. He would be able to totally refine and reject Yu or the Qin Emperor's spiritual sense mark. Just at that moment, Zhong Shou suddenly had an idea. He raised his head and looked forward, a bright glow flashing in his eyes. His left hand was already holding onto the country protecting seal in his sleeve. He had already come into contact with the 12 copper men. There is only one thing I don't understand. Since you have the wings, why didn't you pass it to Xiuguan? Is it because you can't bear to, or is there another reason? This item is in Xiuguan's hands, and even I have to avoid it. I fear it when I see it. However, in your hands I am only slightly afraid, like a fly and a human. This item is a top treasure in the world, and it is a waste for it to be in your hands. Why not give it to me? As he said this, a giant blood-colored hand grabbed over from the direction of the 99-story stargazing tower. However, halfway through, Li Bieshu let out a surprised An eye-catching silver sword light flashed in the sky outside the imperial capital. Then, more and more sword lights appeared in the sky. Sword name is Floating Spirit. Vein Spirit Slayer is below. Floating Spirit Technique, Common Life God refined above. A soft cry rang out as the dark red horizon was torn apart by the life sword chi that tore through the air and sliced apart piece by piece. Zhong Shou felt the pressure on his body suddenly relax. With a thought, the god-refined sword turned into 10,000 feet and slashed towards the black hand above. In an instant, it tore the giant hand into pieces. Li Bieshu laughed and didn't care at all as he retracted the black mist. Vast demon power spread out and once again formed the dark red clouds in the sky. It is the Kenzo Sex Heaven Extinction Earth Destruction Fulling Sword Formation. What a surprise! They actually went all out to help. 7,000 years of accumulation, and they aren't afraid of using it all in this battle. The Kenzo sect really treats you well, Zhong Shou. Zhong Shou was really surprised. The Kenzo sect taking out this fulling sword formation was indeed going all out for this battle. The floating spirit technique, more accurately speaking, was a replacement god technique. That was because there wasn't a single word in this world that could accurately describe it. The fulling god sword was a natural god weapon. Could change the laws of this world in a small area. The 3,000 daos of heaven and earth were of different levels. Some were close to the roots, like his Tao word god technique. His beginning and end god technique was above the laws of the other daos, exceeding the 5 elements. When he fought with cultivators who used the 5 elements, he would naturally have many advantages. That was because his Tao was closer to the roots of the daos. To be continued. Chapter 1205. The 3,000 daos were all split into primary and secondary. As the 5 elements were born from yin and yang, the yin-yang Tao was above the 5 elements. All 5 elements were born from the beginning and ended from the end. This was why all 5 elements were countered by the unlimited beginning and end technique. The difference in priority was pretty much insurmountable. However, the Kenzo sect's fulling god sword could be reversed and replaced. It placed Zhong Shou's unlimited beginning and end technique under the yin-yang 5-element technique and in turn suppressed it. A simpler explanation would be that based on the original laws of heaven and earth, the iron sword was definitely better than the wooden sword. However, after the floating god technique changed the laws, the wooden sword was better than the iron sword. This was the floating god technique, reversal and replacement. This was why, although this ability wasn't close to the source of heaven and earth, it had unlimited strength. It was similar to the 12 copper men of the Great Qin dynasty. At this moment, the various daos involved in the common people's sword formation were raised. The various techniques of the 9 skies and 10 lands bloodline spirit slaughtering killing formation were lowered in grade. It caused the originally slightly weaker common people's sword formation to be able to suppress it. It also caused the pressure that Zhong Shou was facing to lessen. The common people's sword formation could control the strength of heaven and earth and the tribulation power of the Grand Tao. At this moment, with the god-refined sword as the main sword and Wei Su suppressing, the strength of the formation was even greater than that of the common people's vast habitat battle. The vast common people's sword energy swept and swept. No matter how Li Bieshue tried to repair the blood clouds in the sky, he was still able to break them. This caused the 9 skies and 10 lands bloodline spirit slaughtering killing formation to be incomplete. It also allowed Zhong Shou to be able to step forwards once more and break free from the danger of losing his spiritual intelligence. After the floating god technique, it should be time for the heaven to end and earth to destroy. Such a thought flashed across Zhong Shou's mind. Millions of sword lights slashed down at the same time. A fulling sword formation, apart from the fulling god weapon, needed 6 Saint Realm cultivators to take charge. 24 God Realm cultivators suppressing and thousands of Spirit Realm swordsmen. At this moment, the sword light that filled the sky slashed down, as if it could really destroy the heavens and earth. Their auras were all extremely sharp as they smashed into the Fenghua Palace, causing dust and smoke to fill the air. It also caused the restrictions within the Fenghua Palace to be on the verge of collapsing. Zhong Shou looked up at the 99-story stargazing tower. His world-burning blood eyes could already see through the layers of restrictive spells and see Li Bieshue's figure. Wushang Yuan demon frowned and seemed to be finding it tough. Using the power of one vein spirit slaughtering formation to go against 2 top killing formations of the cloud world, even this third person under Xiuguan's benevolence couldn't hold on. Zhong Shou glanced at him and then retracted his gaze. He knew that these 2 sword formations were far from enough to hurt Li Bieshue. He turned his gaze in the direction of the imperial study. Locking onto Inu with his divine sense, his blood-red eyes also pierced through the layers of obstacles and stared straight at him. Inu, if you are willing to take your own life today, declare your guilt, explain the truth to the world, wash away the stain on my friend Buhue's name, and return his corpse. Then I can spare the lives of your family's descendants and your many concubines. Otherwise, Zhong Shou paused for a moment, but his voice remained flat. However, it was filled with killing intent. I'll definitely exterminate your entire clan so that your clan's bloodline will cease to exist in this region. That's all I have to say. When you die, don't complain that I didn't warn you. Jean Buhue didn't care about his reputation, but Zhong Shou couldn't not take it to heart. How could he allow his best friend to be reincarnated with the name of a traitor and the hatred of hundreds of millions of people? For this reason, Zhong Shou was willing to give up this opportunity to destroy the country so that the Taishang throne could be passed down and they could continue to struggle at death's door. In the imperial study, Inu found it funny. Suicide? Guilty verdict? Exterminating the entire clan? Was Zhong Shou talking to him? Was he really crazy? Brat, could it be that your brain is muddled? What right do you have to force me to kill myself? He thought so in his heart and said so out loud. All of a sudden, Inu felt like he was joking. Jean Buhue is my subject, but he colluded with you, the ruler of the enemy country. Isn't that the truth? He has grievances in his heart, so it isn't wrong to say that. He continued, actually, I can do it. As long as you Zhong Shou kill yourself in front of me. Not to mention clearing Jean Buhue's name, why can't I help him enter the Confucian temple? As for his corpse, haven't you heard? That day, it was eaten by thousands of people, so it can be seen that my people hate him to the bone. Zhong Shou was startled. Then, he laughed instead of being angry. The depression in his heart was like a stone that was stuck in his chest, unable to be vented. He felt disgusted and his blood boiled. Since that was the case, then there was nothing much to say. He could only fight. His emotions were raging and he was unable to calm down. The heaven path sword intent on the god-refined sword was also affected and slowly went berserk. More and more houses around were flattened. The ground caved in thousands of feet. However, Zhong Shou didn't feel anything. I really don't understand how someone like you can be called a saint ruler. Are the Confucian factions, so-called Great Confucians, all blind? For Buhui to serve such a muddle-headed ruler like you is the saddest thing in his life. Inyu sat behind the imperial table and smiled without saying anything. He was really calm, treating it as a joke and not caring at all. No matter what this Zhongsho said, it wouldn't hurt him at all, so why did he have to care? In his eyes, although this Zhongsho wasn't someone who was about to die, there was no difference. His reputation wasn't something that Zhongsho could evaluate. When the Taishang unified the cloud world and swept the various regions, he, Inyu, was the ruler of the 27 countries. No matter who it was, they had to sing praises for him. A cold scoff spread out from the side. Preposterous. Within the Fenghua Palace, you are insulting the emperor. Are you looking down on us, Taishang? Jin Buhui harmed the country. That is the public opinion of our Confucian faction. We won't allow you, the Nanman ruler, to twist and reverse the verdict. Zhongsho looked over coldly and recognized that person. It was Jin Buhui's teacher Zhuxin. When he left the cloud world for the first time, he met him. At that time, Zhongshuan was there too. At that time, he didn't have a good impression of this person. At this moment, he felt even more disgusted. Thinking about how Zhongsho was sliced in half at the waist because of this person, Zhongsho really wanted to slice this person into pieces. Along with this person's words, dozens of Saint Realm auras shot over from afar. They were all storing up strength, locking onto Zhongsho's spiritual sense. Zhongsho couldn't help but laugh. A full 13, along with before there were 14. In this battle, there was one less Saint Realm cultivator compared to the one in the Qin Emperor tomb. His spiritual sense continued to expand, and he turned his attention to the 12 copper men behind the reading room. The country protecting seal allowed his spiritual sense to go around the Qin Emperor True Spirit and the spiritual sense mark to enter the core of the 12 copper men. It was different from what he had expected. Inyu had clearly spent a lot of effort in the source of these bronze men. It allowed his spiritual sense to use the Qin Emperor True Spirit as a medium to enter. Originally, he only needed 80 breaths to replace it and wipe out the Qin Emperor's spiritual sense. However, at this moment it seemed like he needed even more time. He had underestimated this Emperor Yuanqin, so what he had to do now was to delay time. Zhongsho's brows furrowed, temporarily suppressing the violent, killing intent that was about to be released. He continued to walk in the air towards the reading room, scoffing coldly. I am sorry. To me, apart from Shiyue and the Shi family, the Taishang has no one else. There is really no one else who can enter my eyes. As for the Confucian faction, I have said that sooner or later, I will burn the books and bury the Confucians, burying all the poisonous fake Confucians in the world. Since your so-called Confucian faction can't be righteous, then what is the point of leaving them alive? Whilst he spoke, the last wall was smashed into pieces by Zhongsho's sword. At this moment, Zhongsho was no longer separated from the imperial reading room. They were just 10,000 feet apart. The 12 copper men were finally unobstructed and were now in Zhongsho's eyes. At this moment, a cold scoff spread out from the air. Burn books and bury Confucians? Am I in the list of Zhongsho to burn books? You say that there is no one in the Taishang, then in your eyes I am like an ant, right? When these words spread out, a white gas suddenly shot into the sky from the east. It caused the 1,200-odd heaven extinction and earth destruction sword lights in the sky to be scattered. Closely after, within the imperial capital, more and more white energy charged into the clouds. They were all different in size and position. Imperial College, Hanlin Academy, Censorate, there were tens of thousands of them, giving off a majestic aura. Heaven, earth, ruler, family, teacher. Ruler, minister, this is the law of heaven and earth. Jin Buhui's actions are a failure and he deserves to be cut in half. Zhu Zi's voice reverberated in the air, majestic and majestic. Within the imperial reading room, Zhuxin's eyes lit up, smiling towards Inyu. Zhu Zi is attacking. As expected from the Confucian saint, this righteous aura makes us juniors pale in comparison. Since ancient times, there is a saying that evil can't win over good. Today it will be the same. With Zhu Zi here, we will be able to force back all evil. We will kill the demon lord. At this moment, Zhong Shou's face showed that he was having a tough time. The Kenzo sect heaven extinction earth destruction fulling sword formation was shaken by Zhu Zi, so he was the first to be affected by the Yin meridian spirit slaughtering formation. The killing formation became stronger, the spirit slaughtering Godlight and the death flame also struck his mind. At this moment, the dozen or so saint-level experts scattered in the surrounding void finally made their move. The moment he made his move, it was like a thunderbolt. More than 10 extremely dangerous and tyrannical forces came crushing down from all directions. It caused Zhong Shou to be in a desperate situation. His soul was suppressed by the spirit slaughtering Godlight and the Yin meridian death flame. The 10 Saint Realm experts working together pretty much locked down his life. Zhong Shou's mind was struggling, his face was smiling like he had lost his mind. What a way to force back all evil! We will kill the demon lord. Didn't they say that when the Tao is a foot tall, the demon is 10 feet tall? The Xian increasing law containing wings buffed and the first life and death serious flower bloomed. A huge amount of life essence power exploded out, temporarily neutralizing the death energy that couldn't be converted. It also forced the spirit slaughtering Godlight out of his soul ocean. Then, the Styx River Death Sword was activated. Zhong Shou's body seemed to turn illusionary as he floated in the air. Chapter 1206. Along with the death energy wave sweeping, a white sword light slashed through the air. It was pretty much traceless. With just a flash, the aura of a Saint Realm cultivator 10 miles away disappeared from everyone's spiritual sense. The people nearby only saw a head being tossed up and then the body turned to dust. Zhong Shou was still standing on the spot like he hadn't moved at all. Under the combined attacks of dozens of Saint Realm experts, he was actually unharmed. The sword light didn't end and this time it shot right into the Imperial reading room. Yin Yu's eyes squinted. The 12 copper men gave out a hollow sound. Once the situation was dangerous, they would act. Zhuoxin, who stood at the side, laughed coldly. He believed that what he did was the right path and was in line with the Confucian faction rules. Dying to protect the Tao was a worthy death, so why would he fear it? However, at that moment, a black shadow suddenly appeared in front of Yin Yu. He was around 30 and had white hair. It was Li Bieshue. He flicked his finger and it touched the tip of the white sword light. Zhong Shou was instantly sent flying along with his sword. He slid 100,000 feet and nearly flew out of the palace. He managed to stop himself with much difficulty. More blood surged out of his mouth, and he looked really tragic. At this moment, a trace of blood appeared on Li Bieshue's fingertip. His entire left index finger started to rot. With his End Realm ability, he was actually unable to recover. He could only frown and temporarily place it down. Zhong Shou's Styx River Death Sword used the Death God art. It confirmed that his finger was already dead. Before it was fixed, even if he regrew it, it was useless. The people around didn't find it weird, but Yin Yu was shocked. He looked closely at the left hand that Li Bieshue kept behind his back. To be able to ignore realm and injure an End Realm. Even half a step End Realm couldn't do that. As for Wushang Yuan Demon, even among End Realm Saint Venerables, he was one of the top people. Speaking of which, the sword that Zhong Shou used was a grade 13 god art? A deep chill surged into his heart. A look of gratitude appeared on Inyu's face. Thank you, Grand Teacher. If you didn't help in time, Inyu might have really died under his sword. It is my job. Li Bieshue didn't care and waved his sleeves. Even without me, that monster lord wouldn't be able to hurt your majesty. Inyu smiled and didn't speak. Although he had the 12 copper men protecting him, He wasn't confident in blocking that sword. Zhong Shou was in a bad state. He used the life and death Sirius to recover from his injuries, and now they exploded once more. His body was riddled with thousands of holes. The blood in his body went berserk and his source spirit shook. The process of converting life origin energy with the life and death arcane transformation was not as smooth as before. Merely this strike had almost caused his soul to disperse and return to nothingness. This was the power of an end realm. Indeed, it was worth it to ask Su Fu to make a move first. If it was just Wei Su and Yuan Jing, they might not have been able to stop Li Bieshue from escaping. Although he was heavily injured, luckily, the common people's sword formation was still running. The god-refined sword slashed in the air, forming layers of sword nets to forcefully block Li Bieshue's chase. It allowed Zhong Shou to have some breathing room to adjust his meridians to recover. However, with that, the common people's path sword was unable to stop him from repairing the 9 heaven 10 earth een vein spirit slaughtering formation. The black and red clouds spread across the sky once more. At this moment, a long sigh spread out from behind him. There is no doubt about the outcome. I am Yang Yihen, the Grand Secretary of the Martial Hall of Great Shang, the left advisor, and the patriarch of the Yang family in Huangjing. I can guarantee that if Gan Emperor is willing to retreat, then you just need to answer to my Emperor and return all of Jiangnan. I will ask the Emperor to show mercy so that you can retreat safely. Yin remained seated as he quietly listened with a smile on his face. He did not stop Yang Yihen's words, nor did he comment on them. Zhong Shou shook his head. How could the few aristocratic families not see through Yang Yihen's thoughts? However noisy. Another silver light flew out from his sleeves. Zimu fallen leaf sped through the air at 10 times the speed. With a swift descent, it pierced Yang Yihen's throat. Threads of blood seeped out from the wound. Yang Yihen touched the wound on his throat. His face was filled with disbelief. Saint Realm had an indestructible body. Even if his body was smashed into dust, he could still recover. However, the celestial slaying power on the blade slashed all his life force when the blade entered his body. Zhong Shou didn't even look at him. He came today to kill Yin and was too lazy to say anything else. Li Bieshue's eyes were cold as he looked on as Yang Yihen's aura slowly disappeared. He laughed coldly. Although he has bad intentions, what he wants to do is beneficial to you. You still can't avoid death. As expected from the blood sword monster lord, vicious. Even I can't take it anymore. Since your majesty is so valiant and isn't willing to retreat, then that is what I want. Then, your majesty, please die here. He reached out with his hand once more and instantly an invisible power grabbed onto Zhong Shou. Zhong Shou only felt his aura stop. At this moment, he couldn't even breathe. Even with the common people's sword formation and the heaven path power protecting him, he found it really tough. The heaven path sword intent was being wiped out bit by bit. The space around him that he could control was also being compressed. Li Bieshue's eyes were filled with disdain. Just as he was about to increase his strength, at this moment, in the sky outside the imperial capital, 2 faintly discernible auras suddenly charged into the city, straight into the imperial capital. Normal cultivators wouldn't be able to notice it, but under his spiritual sense, he was able to see everything clearly. It was an aura on the same level as his, but it was much weaker. Wei Su Yuanjing? The mocking intent in Li Bieshue's eyes became thicker, and he wasn't surprised at all. The 2 of them should have attacked at this moment. If not, in just a moment this Zhong Shou would die in his hands. The only thing that he found weird was that Xiuguan, Yuanjing, and Long Ying were still nowhere to be seen. However, it was okay. As long as he suppressed the 2 of them, he didn't have to worry about Xiuguan not appearing. Suddenly, he had an idea and looked towards the south with a weird expression. Over there was an aura that wasn't weaker than the 2 of them and was even slightly stronger. It was slowly getting closer. Xiufu? Li Bieshua was stunned and then he laughed in disdain. He didn't return to Penglai world to wait for death and instead stepped into this mess. Was he asking to die? So that was the case. For this battle, Song Xingdao didn't only have 5 End Realm Saint Venerables and 2 sword formations, but 6. Then, what confidence did Xiuguan have? He was looking forward to it. Chapter 1207. As expected from Zhu Zi. In the cloud layer 300 miles away, Tai Huang Taoist Lord stood with his hands behind his back, his eyes filled with praise. He pretty much used his own strength to go up against the Kenzo sect Heaven Extinction Earth Destruction Fulling Sword Formation, nearly shaking the foundations of the formation. Apart from Xiuguan Cibei, he is the top person in the cloud world. This Kenzo sect sword formation doesn't have an end realm and is still a little weaker. A large portion of its strength is used to disturb Li Bieshue's vain spirit slaughtering. It doesn't have much defensive strength. Zhu Zi has close to 10,000 Confucians and gathered righteous energy, so it isn't hard to shake it. Qing Xian shook his head and didn't think much of it. If any end realm held the fulling sword, it wouldn't be like today. The foundations are actually above the vain spirit slaughtering. Taoist brother Cibei specially found the sect protecting weapon for the Kenzo sect, so naturally, it isn't weak. Unfortunately, although he developed it for 7,000 years, the 7 sects of the Kenzo sect still haven't reached their peak. Only that Kenzo sect head has a chance of reaching End Realm within 100 years. Tai Huang Taoist Lord nodded his head and acknowledged Qing Xian's words. Then, he smiled. Actually, I am more curious about what is happening within the Fenghua Palace. Li Bieshua laid out the 9 Heaven 10 Earth vain spirit slaughtering formation not just to trap Zhong Shou but also to target you and me. I really don't know what he is thinking. Does he really have the confidence to toss us aside and face the many saint venerables of Song Xingdao alone? Or is there something else that he wants to hide? Since Zhu Zi acted to shake the Kenzo sect fulling sword formation, Li Bieshua had extra strength. The entire Apang Palace was covered once more. Even people with high cultivation like the two of them couldn't see through the scenes within the formation. Trying to hide makes it more obvious. Qing Xian scoffed coldly, his face filled with disdain and rage. Qing Ming, who was at the back, kept silent. He also guessed that even if he lost today, Tai Huang, Qing Xian and Li Bieshua wouldn't sit still and watch Song Xingdao kill him. Therefore, he was unscrupulous. At this moment, the Taoist, Confucian, and demon sects were still able to hold their own against Song Xingdao, Kenzo sect, and Buddhist sections. However, if Li Bieshua were to die today and be successfully suppressed by Song Xingdao, in that case, the Confucian and Taoist factions would definitely face more pressure from Song Xingdao. At this moment, she was slightly curious. What was Li Bieshua trying to hide? He would rather take the risk and abandon the 2 patriarchs? Suddenly, she sensed something and looked towards the imperial city once more. Then, his eyes brightened. It's Wei Su and Yuan Jing. They've entered the formation. She couldn't sense the auras of the 2 End Realm Saint Venerables. However, right as the 2 of them smashed into the 9 Heavens and 10 Earth vain spirit slaughtering formation, the change in Yuan Qi in that instant was finally revealed. Not only the 2 of them, but on the east and west, there were 2 spiritual energy fluctuations that weren't weaker than the first 2. The one on the east should beat Song Xingdao God Venerable, Tai Donghua Emperor Lord. Why is the other one Xufu? In Qingming's eyes, there was a look of surprise and confusion. She didn't expect that Xufu, who was rumored to have left the cloud world, would actually join in. Moreover, he was standing on the side of Zhong Shou. It was said that this person was able to differentiate between good and bad. During the Qin dynasty, he thought that the Qin emperor was using the immortal medicine as an excuse to leave the cloud world and avoid death. So, what was the reason for this ancient necromancer to take such a risk and participate in this battle? She felt a little uneasy in her heart. Then, she noticed that Tai Huang and Qing Xian were still really calm. This person's interference is really surprising. Is he relying on Ao Kuan's existence and destruction technique? If he wants to break the Qin Emperor God restriction, that is probably the only way. However, as long as Ao Kuan doesn't reach the Saint Realm, there is no chance of that. With his knowledge, he should know that the chances of that happening are really small. Qing Xian took in a deep breath. Also, the battle today has been really weird from start to finish. Now, I really don't understand. That is indeed the case. Also, that Xiuguan is still nowhere to be seen. Who knows where he is hiding? However, since Wei Su and Yuan Jing have already joined in, then it is time to decide the victor. Tai Huang smiled. His gaze was as sharp as a knife. Senior brother, what are your thoughts now? When Qing Xian heard that, he laughed out loud. If Xiuguan isn't here, then we will force him to appear. If we don't act now and wait any longer, it will be too late. If we want to know what Li Bieshue is planning, waiting here isn't a solution. However, his voice paused. Qing Xian focused once more in the direction of the imperial city. I think that Yin Yu is going to use the 12 copper men. Within a Pang Palace, along with 4 strong auras charging in from 4 directions. A few more gaps were torn in the blood clouds that filled the sky. The stuffy feeling in Zhong Shou's chest was instantly relieved. Once again, balls of spirit slaughtering Godlight were pulled out of his soul ocean. However, Li Bieshue wasn't willing to give him any chance to breathe. The invisible giant hand from before wasn't able to do anything, so with a flash, he was in front of Zhong Shou. Once again, he opened his hand and grabbed onto Zhong Shou's face. Zhong Shou's pupils constricted. His body used a mysterious trajectory to retreat, not bothering about anything. Li Bieshue's basic technique was the empty energy illusionary god technique, a grade 12 world-destroying ability. Based on Xiuguan's evaluation, if one could create something out of nothing, complete the reversal and grasp the being and nothingness Tao, then this Wushang Yuan demon would be able to enter half a step true realm. As for their abilities and techniques, they would also reach the supreme realm. He might even be able to create a god technique from the being and nothingness technique. One could see that this person's potential wasn't any weaker than Zhu Zi's. Li Bieshue's empty energy illusionary god technique could cause everything it touched, no matter what it was, to be forcefully converted into nothingness. This was the case at this moment. Zhong Shou used the common people sword formation to borrow the tribulation's strength of heaven and earth. At this moment, it was easily destroyed by Li Bieshue's nothingness power. Zhong Shou also knew that as long as this hand was 3 feet away from his body, without needing to touch him, his body would be forcefully turned into nothingness by the void energy illusionary god technique. Without hesitation, the second life and death Sirius opened up. Life essence power surged and Zhong Shou used it to heal his injuries. Then, just as the death energy surged out from the epiphyllum, he stabbed out once more. With a light dang, the tip of the One Origin Soul Sword struck like it had struck metal. It directly broke through the ethereal and unfathomable power of nothingness and pierced through. Even Wushang Yuan Demon's expression was solemn. He grabbed with his hand and changed it into a fist. It smashed onto Zhong Shou's One Origin Soul Sword. Death energy exploded out. Li Bieshue stood on the spot and didn't move. However, there seemed to be a death gate opening around him as death energy surged out. As for Li Bieshue's right hand, it had turned completely gray at this moment. His entire right hand, below the wrist, was totally killed by Zhong Shou's Styx River Death Sword. The previous sword was just the remaining power of Zhong Shou's Styx Death Sword, which was why it only injured one of his fingers. At this moment, Zhong Shou gathered the power of the entire life and death Sirius flower into this sword. This was why the injuries it caused were 10 times more serious. It affected Li Bieshue's entire wrist. At this moment, Zhong Shou retreated a full 10,000 feet. It was slightly better than the previous strike. However, he was still bleeding from his 7 orifices and his expression was really tragic. However, Zhong Shou didn't show any signs of pain. Instead, he laughed out loud. The few auras behind him were tempted to attack. It was those few Saint Realm experts. Seeing that he was injured, they wanted to surround and kill him once more. Zhong Shou didn't hesitate and 3 more silver knife shadows flew out from his sleeves. Instantly, one person's brow was pierced. He had used up all his Zimu fallen leaf knives. At this moment, he was using the top-grade magical treasure flying knife that he had nurtured for 4 days. This was why he was only able to kill this person after 3 consecutive strikes. The moment this person died, the other people stopped their intentions to attack. Zhong Shou stood up once more and proudly stood alone. He had succeeded. The power of his essence spirit had truly entered the core of the 12 bronze men. Now, he only needed 10 to 20 breaths to complete the spiritual sense imprint. Actually, at this moment, he could use the country-protecting Jade Seal to control the 12 copper men. However, there was no guarantee. Inu could still use the Qin Emperor True Spirit to fight with him. A bit of soul power along with the Jade Seal might not be able to win against Inu. Instead, it would give him time to react. An incomplete copper man wouldn't be able to suppress Li Bieshue, and it would alert the enemy. Li Bieshue glanced at his left hand and didn't care at all as he let out a cold snort. This supreme divine ability level sword technique was indeed extraordinary, disregarding cultivation levels. However, that was just it. It couldn't hurt him at all. He didn't attack Zhong Shou as a wave of magnetism power had already covered the area. A strong repulsion covered the area in front of Zhong Shou and locked down the space where Li Bieshue could continue to attack. Out of the 4 end realms, Xiufu was the last to attack. However, he arrived first, arriving before the other 3. Apart from the repulsion power blocking, there was also magnetism power that tore at Li Bieshue. Apart from that, there was also 10,000 times the gravity, causing Li Bieshue to feel his body sink. Following which, a gray sword shadow sped over at the same time. It struck right at Inu, who was in the Imperial Reading Room, where Li Bieshue had to save. This sword actually gathered large amounts of death power, no different from Zhong Shou's sword. Li Bieshue had a weird expression on his face, but he didn't hesitate as he flashed back into the Imperial Reading Room. At this moment, Zhong Shou's eyes also had a weird expression. Styx River Death Sword. Be it the nature of the power, the aura, or the trajectory of the sword, it was no different from before. It was like a mirror of him, and it was even stronger than Zhong Shou comprehended. This was Wei Su. The mirror image technique almost completely replicated the Styx River Death Sword that he had used just now. Chapter 1208. The Styx Death Sword had 90% of its charm, but when Wei Su used it with his End Realm strength, it was filled with death power. Within the Imperial Reading Room, even Li Bieshue didn't dare to block with his bare hands. He casually took out a blood-colored crescent blade. It slashed onto the ashen white sword shadow. However, this celestial-grade demon weapon turned ashen white in color. Metal powder scattered everywhere. After being struck by the Styx Death Sword, his life force was severed. He was completely dead and turned into dust. The death power spread to Li Bieshue's arm. Although it wasn't enough to cause Wushang Yuan Demon's entire arm to totally die, Li Bieshue frowned. Li Bieshue frowned slightly, the entire sleeve of his right hand turned to dust. Not far away, numerous wooden vines stretched over like a wave. Yuanjing's aura was also swiftly closing in. The Yin Vein Spirit Slaughter was suppressed by the Fulling Sword formation and the Remnant Life 7 sword. It was originally 100% strong, but now it could only use 10%. Along with the four end realm Saint Venerables, it was even worse. Li Bieshua's eyes flashed and he waved his sleeves. The death energy around was dispelled with the power of the void. Then, he was really calm and bowed. There are many small fries today. Your Majesty, please use the copper men to help me kill these people. Inu was still sitting on the throne, calm and unruffled in the midst of chaos. At this moment, he laughed. I was thinking the same thing. Actually, even if Grand Teacher didn't say it, I was prepared to use the copper men. In my eyes, it is best to end this battle early in case it disturbs the people. The 18 million people in the city are all living in fear. He had a slight headache. This Fenghua Palace is mostly destroyed today. To repair it, we need at least 1 million mind stones. Who knows how much we will need to spend? What a waste. Please show mercy later, State Preceptor. Just as he spoke, a golden halo spread out beneath the feet of the 12 copper men. It was really bright and eye-catching. There were also numerous ancient runes that appeared one by one. Those weird runes were really familiar to Zhong Shou, but he couldn't recognize them. He knew that these runes had been deliberately altered, and they were manifesting the twisted and chaotic laws. The 12 circles of light continued to spread out, covering an area of 700 miles. Then, they gradually faded. Zhong Shou could feel his cultivation dropping rapidly. He was actually forcefully suppressed to the peak of the celestial realm by the chaotic power of the laws. He was pretty much unable to maintain his inner world. The 6 statues on the left side of the 12 bronze statues also waved their fists. It was ferocious and powerful as it charged towards Yuanjing. Yuanjing's expression was calm. She was not surprised. He stood in the air, and with a wave of his hand, the ground below caved in by tens of thousands of feet. It was as if a piece of the entire 10,000 feet underground had been dug out. In front of Yuanjing's unspecialized, a huge crystal shield appeared. The mountain-sized copper fists bombarded it, causing crystals to fly everywhere. However, Yuanjing herself was completely unscathed. Samuraim's eyes lit up and his heart instantly calmed down. He mocked himself in his heart. Be it Yuanjing or Wei Su, the strength that they displayed exceeded his expectations. On the contrary, even if he was in charge of the common people's 7 swords and had the power of the heaven path, he was still in a bad state. Wei Su's mirror projection technique was able to replicate his supreme divine ability, allowing him to surpass Su Fu, who was the strongest among them, and become the strongest among them all. Yuanjing's great Tao was the E-word, which was the mystical spirit heaven-changing technique. With Xianling as the foundation, when it was at its peak, it could change heaven and earth. The so-called E referred to the meaning of change, and exchange. It was also one of the Tao laws in heaven and earth that was close to the foundations. Yuanjing's E-word technique could change thousands of times. It could cause all things in heaven and earth to change. Just now, when the 6 copper men worked together to strike, Yuanjing turned the hundreds of thousands of feet underground into a layer of crystals that were as hard as celestial treasures. Then, he changed the power of the copper man to another place. Maybe her combat strength wasn't as strong as Wei Su and Xufu, but she was the one with the strongest survival ability. It was said that the higher one's cultivation, the stronger one would be. If Yuanjing had peak cultivation, she might be able to use the mysterious spirit heaven-changing technique to use her celestial power to forcefully change the copper men. She wouldn't have to go through so much trouble today. Shaking his head, Zhong Shou looked forwards once more. He was really solemn. The power of the 12 copper men started to suppress. Wei Su and Yuanjing's cultivation dropped to Saint Realm. The laws were in chaos and the soul couldn't rely on the Tao anymore. Only Tai Donghua Emperor Lord wasn't affected much. Millions of vines still surged over. Li Bieshua didn't care. Void power spread out for 10 miles, causing the vines to turn into nothingness. Then, his hand grabbed towards Zhong Shou's direction, grabbing towards him. Zhong Shou's brow rose up, His eyes were calm and cold like a lake. The wings in his soul ocean instantly buffed the unlimited beginning and end Dharma. He didn't retreat and instead advanced. While he flashed forwards, he slashed down. The black and white light instantly turned into a sword body. The empty hand was easily sliced apart, and the sword force was still maintained at its peak. It followed a straight line and struck back. One origin black and white sword. It was fierce beyond compare, straightforward, and without the slightest bit of variation. That was because the sword was so fast that it completely suppressed the power of time and space. If there were any other techniques in the world that could go up against his unlimited beginning and end Tao, it would definitely be one of them. Li Bieshue's void energy illusionary god technique was definitely one of them. Since he entered the Fenghua Palace, his black hole power wasn't able to swallow any energy. He could only use his own strength to maintain the unlimited beginning and end technique. This was also the reason why Zhong Shou didn't use the wings to buff it. Even if a grade 13 supreme technique could only last for 200 breaths, it was enough to suck him dry. On the contrary, the Styx River Death Sword and Six God Defensive Knife technique didn't have such a problem. Li Bieshue laughed and flicked his finger, clashing with the tip of the One Origin sword once more. Without any suspense, Zhong Shou was once again sent flying into the distance. His strength fell to celestial realm, and the injuries he suffered were even heavier. Looking at Li Bieshue, only his fingertip was swallowed by the black and white sword light. However, when Li Bieshue's flesh and blood entered the black hole, it went from being there to being nothing and totally dissipated. Even a grade 13 unlimited beginning and end supreme technique couldn't transform it at all. However, Zhong Shou's goal wasn't to borrow strength or hope to injure Li Bieshue. Firstly, he wanted to delay time, and secondly, he wanted to help Wei Su. Glancing over, he saw that the ashen white sword light had disappeared without a trace. What replaced it was the black and white sword. The Styx River Death Sword controlled the power of death. The 12 copper men could firmly suppress them. The Six God Defensive Knife technique and Celestial Slaying Flying Knife came from another region. However, what this supreme ability relied on was the laws of this region. Only the unlimited beginning and end Tao wasn't born during the Qin era, which was why it wasn't suppressed by the 12 copper men. Unfortunately, the unlimited beginning and end was just Zhong Shou's Dharma. His foundation was the Tao word and should have been above the 12 bronze men. However, before he merged the 3,000 true techniques and went from complex to simple, before he merged his Tao into one, he would still be affected by the 12 copper men, although Wei Su's realm was suppressed, with the mirror technique, Saint Realm body, and his One Origin beginning and end sword. His combat strength was only a little lower. The black and white sword slashed over and Li Bieshue's expression changed. He took out a celestial weapon and waved it at Wei Su. With a light clang, Wei Su's body instantly retreated into the distance. However, with that, he lost the chance to chase and kill Zhong Shou. Li Bieshue didn't care. The lives of these few people and the wings would fall into his hands sooner or later. It was just a matter of time. He cared more about where Xiuguan was and when he would attack. Yin smiled. As expected, Grand Teacher is invincible. It seems like I can rest easy today. Your Majesty, you are wrong. With His Majesty's 12 copper men, these people are just ants in my eyes. However, if that person doesn't appear, I don't dare to say that I will definitely win. Li Bieshue shook his head and said flatly. Then, he frowned and looked into the distance. Apart from the magnetic energy at the start, Penglai Shifu hadn't made any movements in a long time. A moment later, he understood. Did Qin Xian and Tai Huang finally make a move? His true body probably wouldn't dare to enter the formation, just like how he didn't want to enter Dowling Vast Habitat. Then, was it an incarnation? Why did he search for Shifu? Squinting, Li Bieshue knew what was going on. Other people didn't know why Shufu came, but he could guess. Shufu's curse could only be solved by the existence and destruction technique. If it was just Ao Kuan, naturally, he wouldn't be able to do it. However, if he added in the wings, there was a chance. As expected, Tai Huang and Qing Xian were suspicious. However, at this point, it was already too late. The moment such a thought rose up, he saw tens of thousands of white energy charge into the formation, forcing away all evil. The spirit slaughtering Godlight and Meridian Death Flame Lightning all collapsed like snow meeting fire, melting. The righteous energy of tens of thousands of Confucians was wrapped up by Zhu Zi's God power and pressed down on the area. Li Bieshue felt really annoyed. What was this Confucian faction Saint Venerable doing? Then, he heard Zhu Zi's voice spread out from the distance. This kid is the enemy of the Confucians, the evil ruler. Our Confucian faction should personally kill him. Li Bieshue's chest was originally filled with anger, but after a moment, his expression changed slightly. A white lightning descended. It was the Jiuxuan back to hiding god asking lightning. This was the tribulation of end-realm experts to test the mind. It didn't have any strength, and after absorbing it, one's cultivation would greatly increase. However, as long as one's body had any impure energy, it would cause huge amounts of heaven and earth power. However, in this world, how could there be such a good, evil, crazy, and evil person? This was why those half-a-step end-realm cultivators who tried to go through the tribulation all feared him like a tiger. Although this Zong Shou had the saint ruler body, he definitely couldn't be flawless and have no evil energy around him. Chapter 1209. At this moment, 200,000 feet away from the reading room, within the endless black mist and red light, Shufu stood in the air with his hands behind his back. He smiled as he looked into the distance. There was a figure standing there, blocking his path. At this moment, there was also an extremely dangerous spiritual sense behind him that locked his primordial spirit. It was like a beast hunting for food. As long as he moved, it would pounce on him. However, Shufu didn't care much about it and treated it calmly. His attitude also surprised the person on the other side. He walked out from the black mist, and it was Qin Xian. Looking at your situation, you don't seem surprised? I should say that this is within my expectations. Shufu nodded. Since I decided to help the Gone Emperor, I had already expected it. I knew that Qing Xian and Tai Huang would definitely ask about it. As expected from Penglai Cultivator, you really expected it. Taoist Lord Tai Huang walked out of the mist and his eyes flashed. Then, fellow Taoist Su should know why the two of us are here. Unknowingly, Qing Xian was suppressing him. He compressed the space that Shufu could use to the extreme. At this moment, even if the two of them were using incarnations, they were still suppressed by the 12 copper men. There was no way that Su Fu would be able to escape from them. However, Shufu didn't reply and instead asked, "Are the two of you using the One Spirit Three Pure Ones technique? These incarnations are split from the main bodies of the two of you. If you turn into ashes here, although it won't affect your main bodies, it will be tough to recover. There will be some hindrances, right?" Qing Xian was startled when he heard this. What was Shufu trying to say? Shufu smiled. "I think it is best for the two of you to leave. If you are too slow, there might be some unexpected problems." When he said this, Qing Xian and Tai Huang exchanged glances with one another, filled with confusion. Tai Huang shook his head and was too lazy to ask what he meant. Although this incarnation wasn't his main body, it had 60% of his main body's ability. After it was consumed, although it would be problematic. However, unless Li Bieshue was prepared to become enemies with the two of them, no matter what happened, they would be able to deal with it. However, since it couldn't hurt their main bodies, then unless Li Bieshue was crazy, he wouldn't attack the two incarnations. Let's not talk about such nonsense. Fellow Taoist, you only need to clearly explain why Li Bieshue broke the agreement. Xiufu, how did Zhong Shou persuade you? The two of you are really sharp. Li Bieshue's plan and the reason why I returned to the cloud world. It can help Li Bieshue attain the Tao, and it can also help me, Xiufu, undo the Qin Emperor's forbidden technique. When he said this, Qing Xian and Xiufu's expressions changed slightly. Li Bieshue's, what kind of god treasure was in Zhong Shou's hand? However, Su Fu's tone suddenly changed as he smiled, and he said, however, I'm afraid you won't have a chance anymore. If you don't leave, it will be too late. He exclaimed and looked into the distance in deep thought. It is already too late. Other people wouldn't be able to sense it, but he had a special connection with the Qin Emperor's true spirit. At this moment, he could clearly sense that the Qin Emperor true spirit mark on the 12 copper men was being replaced and wiped away. Actually, he didn't feel any psychological burden about betraying Zhong Shou. However, his way of doing things was to stand on the side of the winner. Be it De Qian or Tsang Xingdao, they were both like the morning sun. The key was that Ao Kuan definitely wouldn't wipe away the Qin Emperor curse mark for someone who betrayed his brother, so how he would reply to Qing Xian and Tai Huang was destined. Qing Xian's eyes were filled with rage and he was slightly annoyed. Then, he looked into the sky and saw numerous white lights charging into the 9 heaven 10 earth Yin vein spirit slaughtering formation. He was first shocked and then Qing Xian's expression changed. Xiufu was also shocked. This is the Jiuxuan back to hiding god asking lightning? All of a sudden, his expression changed. He definitely didn't expect that there would be such a change. The Jiuxuan back to hiding god asking lightning tested the heart and released energy. It was one of the most dangerous end-realm tribulations. It didn't have much strength, but once it exploded out, even Xiufu wouldn't have a chance of going through the tribulation. Everyone had energy and it came from the heart. Gods gathered the heart and soul of billions of people and grasped God power. In essence, it was a type of energy. As for the king of a country, the king's qi was similar. The strength of a country was formed from the thoughts of the people. People with righteous hearts often did good things, which was why their righteous energy was vast and filled with gratitude and kindness. People with evil hearts did evil things and were hated by others. Naturally, they would be filled with vengeance and vengeance. People who were lustful and greedy would be filled with evil energy. The Jiuxuan back to hiding god asking lightning tested the heart, but as long as one retracted their thoughts when going through the tribulation, one could avoid it. However, the energy around one's body couldn't, which was why no one could take it head-on and be perfectly fine. In this world, there definitely couldn't be people who were extremely good, extremely evil, extremely crazy, and extremely evil. However, the Jiuxuan back to hiding god asking lightning tribulation was one of the rarest ones in the world. Only under very special circumstances would it be triggered. How could Zhu Zi control it? Moreover, why was it so strong? This isn't the true Jiuxuan back to hiding god asking lightning. It just looks similar. Tai Huang shook his head and was in deep thought. In the past, I heard Zhu Zi say that he wanted to replicate this tribulation to create a lightning technique to punish evil and promote good. Kind people live and evil people die. If one did good things, one could restore the 3 ancient dynasties. Could it be that he really did it? How is that possible? Qing Xian scoffed coldly. There is still the foundations of the Jiuxuan back to hiding god asking lightning. Who knows where this Zhu Zi collected it from? Along with his half-baked lightning technique, it formed a monster. Only the best people in the world can live. Even if it was Zhu Zi, he might not be perfectly fine after taking on this lightning. Breaking out into a laugh, Qing Xian's expression became more and more disdainful. This person really put in a lot of effort. Only because the saint ruler had evil in his body would he die from the Jiuxuan back to hiding god asking lightning. However, because he died to the Jiuxuan back to hiding god asking lightning, Zhong Shou wasn't a true saint or saint ruler. This is why the Reason sect is still the orthodox path of heaven and earth. Today, this Zhong Shou has to die. Xiufu's face was alternating between green and white. However, a moment later, his heart moved and he thought back to the Qin Emperor tomb. He had seen Zhong Shou summon that black Qilin. After combining with the black and white Dharma, it was able to chase away evil and purify everything it passed. The scenes at that time left a deep impression on him. Black and white Qilin? Or? Xiufu calmed down and a smile appeared in his eyes once more. He casually took out a ball of spiritual liquid and rubbed it on his face. However, 200,000 feet away, a ball of pure white king energy charged into the clouds. The roar of dragons and cries of phoenixes was like celestial music. Chapter 12:10. When the white lightning landed, Zhong Shou was shocked. He had never seen such a tribulation lightning before. However, Zhong Shou had read a small portion of Tsang Shengdao's books and immediately recognized what this lightning tribulation was. Jiuxuan back to hiding God, asking lightning, testing the heart and releasing energy. He was instinctively shocked. He remembered that in the book, there was Shi Zi's annotation. Asking about good and evil, this lightning tribulation is the strongest in the world, I can't block it. The annotation was left by Shi Zi before he reached End Realm. What he meant was that even before Shi Zi went through his tribulation, he wasn't willing to face it and was unable to block it. Zhong Shou clenched his fists, his fingernails digging into his flesh. At this moment, he heard Zhu Zi's cold voice spread out. This lightning is called the God Sky Heart Questioning Lightning. I created it based on the Jiuxuan back to hiding God, asking lightning to punish the evil in the world and promote the good in the world. Although it isn't completed, one can ask about good and evil. Good and righteous will be born and can obtain the good fortune of heaven and earth. However, if one has evil thoughts, one will be killed by the lightning. Since the gone emperor is the saint ruler of the world, a saint descending, you must be a kind person. The tens of thousands of righteous energies pressed over. Li Bieshue was also in front of him, locking onto him with his spiritual sense. Zhong Shou had nowhere to hide and could only wave his sleeves to toss little gold, Hanshi, and the blue fire Xian turtle out of his body. In case these little fellows were implicated by the divine firmament core seeking lightning. In his heart, he was so angry that he was delighted. The Jiuxuan back to hiding God asking lightning was triggered by anger. However, people like Jin Buhui, who lived a magnanimous life but was framed and hated by people, were mostly covered in evil energy. How could the God Sky Heart Questioning Lightning differentiate between good and evil? Moreover, how would there be any good people in the world? Little Gold and the others were easy to deal with. He just tossed them to the side. It was okay for Xiaori and Xiaoye to hide within the black and white Dharma. Only Jin Buhui's soul couldn't be thrown out like that. This place was filled with righteous energy that filled the sky. The blood-red spirit slaughtering Godlight lingered around. Jin Buhui's soul was originally broken. Even if this fellow had a righteous heart and was not afraid of these great Confucian scholars. However, once they left his protection, they would definitely be attacked. At that time, they wouldn't even be able to reincarnate. Just as he was hesitating, the white lightning entered his body. It immediately penetrated Zhong Shou's body and flowed into his limbs and bones. It even slammed into his divine firmament acupoint and rushed into his essence, soul C. Every nook and cranny of his body, every gap in his body, and every acupoint was not missed. Zhu Zi's voice continued, Your Majesty Qian Emperor, if you are really a saint ruler or a saint, then you will naturally be safe and sound after this tribulation. You will also be able to obtain endless benefit. Take it as a gift from me. However, if the lightning energy was triggered and the body perished, it would be the same. You have evil thoughts in your heart, so how dare you call yourself a saint? At this moment, Zhong Shouxin felt really frustrated and depressed. He retracted pretty much all the strength in his body and was prepared to deal with the explosion of the tribulation power. His spiritual sense sped up and he totally controlled the 12 copper men. The copper men could twist and mess up the laws of the world, but was it effective against the tribulation power of the heaven-seeking lightning? At this moment, no matter whether or not it was useful, he had to try. As long as he wasn't willing to die here, then he had to use all his strength to go up against the heaven-seeking lightning. Li Bieshue, who was on the opposite side, also stopped his movements at this time. His eyes were filled with fear. Zhu Zi said that it was the heaven-seeking lightning, but with his cultivation, he could see that the core was the Jiuxuan back to hiding God, asking tribulation lightning. Even he had to avoid such tribulation power and didn't dare to come into contact with it. With his late end realm strength, it wasn't that he couldn't block it. However, if he blocked it, he would definitely suffer heavy injuries. If Zhong Shou died, the wings would be ownerless. However, if he couldn't protect it, then it would all be for nothing. Qing Xian was too yellow and was spying not far away. He had to be really careful in this battle. Shaking his head slightly, Li Bieshue was expressionless once more. He didn't care who killed Zhong Shou, he just needed to get that item. It was just a matter of waiting a little longer, so it was okay. His eyes were filled with cold, mocking intent. This Zhu Zi had really put in a lot of effort to protect the reputation of the Confucians. Dying under the Jiuxuan return to concealment God-seeking lightning was the most depressing thing. This Zhong Shou was a hero and was really talented, but he died because of it. How amusing, tragic, and pitiful. Just as he was thinking about that, Li Bieshue was startled. His expression was filled with shock as he looked opposite in shock. Close to 2 breaths of time had passed since the tribulation lightning entered his body. However, the God-asking lightning tribulation power still didn't show any signs of exploding out. Those threads of white lightning were like snakes circling around Zhong Shou's body. However, they couldn't find a target and could only circle around aimlessly. Being activated by the 30,000 righteous energy, a thick white energy pillar charged into the clouds. There was gold within the white, so pure that it was eye-piercing. It was 1,000 feet thick, and had the image of a dragon and phoenix circling it. The dragon was 10,000 feet long, its horns were vicious, and it had 5 legs and 9 claws. The phoenix was a fire phoenix, it had a purple gold crown on its head, and its body was burning with red flames. It was blessed by heaven and earth. The will of the heavens turned into the shape of the strongest god-beast in the world to protect fate. At this moment it seemed like it had been offended. The giant dragon roared and the fire phoenix cried out. Out of the 30,000 streams of righteous chi that covered the sky, 10,000 streams were instantly shattered and disintegrated by the cries of the dragons and phoenixes. At this moment, Zhong Shou himself was totally stunned. The so-called divine firmament heart-seeking lightning was already in his body. It had surged back and forth for dozens of times, but there was still no sign of the tribulation power erupting. Not only did it not explode, but it even gave rise to threads of warmth that flowed into his 9 chakra meridians, limbs, and bones. His celestial essence, which was half consumed, instantly recovered to its peak. Those wounds were also closing up at a shocking speed. Not only were his physical injuries healed, but they were also strengthening. Before this, due to Li Xian disturbing him, he wasn't able to complete the final step of the indestructible body. At this moment, he easily crossed it, completing it like water flowing through a canal. His sea of soul was also constantly expanding at this moment. The inner heaven and earth in his body was also getting closer and closer to being complete. It wasn't just limited to the increase in cultivation. The Tao word at the core of his soul was also increasing. Many spiritual patterns and talismans were being formed and added in. There were many Taos that Zhong Shou had never come into contact with before. However, at this moment, for some reason, he understood the true meaning within and grasped all the mysteries. Such a situation, did the legendary Jiuquan back to hiding God, asking lightning, didn't have any strength and instead greatly increased one's cultivation. However, the prerequisite was that one had to pass the God asking lightning. In that case, could it be that he had safely passed through the current situation? So, the lightning power didn't explode out? After being stunned for a moment, Zhong Shou understood and thought back to the Black Qilin. Xiari ate the good energy in the world to live, while the Black Qilin ate the evil energy as food. When the two offset each other, what was left was naturally what Xiari couldn't swallow, the so-called pure good energy. So that was the case. This was really the will of the heavens. Zhong Shoxin didn't feel much joy in his heart. Instead, he sighed. Zhu Zi's actions today must have been planned for a long time, and he was determined to succeed. However, it would also push the entire Confucian faction and the Confucian faction into an irrecoverable state. The Confucian word was what people needed. They needed morals, and morals they needed to rule a country. This was why the Confucian faction was able to survive for tens of thousands of years and become the top faction in the world. However, today, were they hated by the heavens? The god heart asking lightning might not be able to find a target. After it swept around Zhong Shou's body, a portion of it continued to spread around. Jin Buhui's soul was within Zhong Shou's sleeves and was the first to be hit. Zhong Shoxin was shocked and instantly tossed aside all the random thoughts. Just as he was about to retract the lightning power, he had an idea. With a thought, he activated the moon howling evil erosion ability to try to swallow the evil energy. Moments later, he allowed the lightning power to enter Jin Buhui's soul. In just a breath, Zhong Shou's eyes were filled with surprise. When his cultivation increased, he wasn't happy. Instead, he felt pity for the Confucian faction. The Confucian faction actually had some good points. However, at this moment, Jin Buhui's soul was recovering bit by bit under the infusion of the lightning. Zhong Shou felt really happy and delighted. The heavens have eyes and won't let the loyal be wronged. Pure white king energy charged into the sky. The dragon and phoenix roared like they were venting their anger, causing the sky to be covered in red flames and the wind to sweep. The righteous energy of the 10,000 Confucians was forcefully scattered. As for the remaining 20,000 or so strands, they were trembling and swaying. Under the suppression of the pure white king energy, they were barely able to hold on. At this moment, another ball of white energy also charged into the sky from Zhong Shou's sleeve. It was also pure white, pure and flawless. It was righteous and had a slight purple tint. Along with Zhong Shou's pure white king energy, it shone brightly. Although the pillar of qi was small, it was not dimmed by the contrast. Jin Buhui's soul body also appeared beside Zhong Shou. He was at a loss as he looked around. His eyes were filled with confusion. Before this, he had been sleeping in Zhong Shou's sleeve. Only now did he wake up. He noticed that the weakness in his spiritual sense had disappeared. Instead, it felt really warm and strong. It was even stronger than when he had a physical body. Pretty much at the same time, within the Confucian temple, in front of the 3 Confucian faction saints, Zhu Shi, who was sitting cross-legged, spat out a mouthful of fresh blood which dyed the robe in front of his chest red. His eyes dimmed and his aura became chaotic, causing him to feel like his body was being sliced by knives. However, the pain in his body couldn't be compared to the pain in his heart. It was like he was being sliced by 1,000 blades and roasted by flames. An indescribable sense of regret and fear spread in Zhu Shi's chest, and his heart burned with anger. At this moment, there were dozens of Confucian faction masters sitting cross-legged around him. Their chests were also dyed in blood and their eyes were filled with disbelief. To be continued. Chapter 12:11. Even the Jiuquan back to hiding God asking lightning was useless. He actually has a pure and righteous body, a true saint. Then, why did we do what we did today? Pure and righteous? Haha, what a joke, what a joke! Even the 3 ancient saint emperors wouldn't be able to survive the tribulation power of the Jiuquan back to hiding God, asking lightning. Preposterous, preposterous. Since the Qian emperor is a saint ruler, then what are we? The Deqian policies and our Confucian teachings are totally different. However, in these 10 years, a prosperous era has appeared. The old are taken care of, the young have someone to rely on, the country is prosperous, and the people are safe. Within the capital, everyone is living a luxurious life. Even the 3 ancient dynasties weren't as good as this. Were we really wrong? The 16,000-year teachings of the Confucian faction all went down the wrong path? That person is a saint ruler. He is recognized by heaven and earth, a saint who is perfectly fine under the Jiuquan back to hiding God, asking lightning. He is flawless, pure and righteous. How can it be that person who is wrong? The one who is wrong isn't the Confucian faction but the Confucian faction. This voice rang out amidst the chaos and instantly suppressed everything else. It was so loud that the entire Confucian temple was deathly silent. The one who was wrong wasn't the Confucian faction but the Confucian faction. The Confucian faction was passed down by the 3 saints and was recognized by heaven and earth. Naturally, their eyes wouldn't be wrong. If the Confucian faction wanted to continue, then the one who was wrong could only be someone else. Zhu Zi's face turned green, but he didn't scold them. His prestige had already been shaken. Unless Zhong Shou died, then there was no way to salvage the situation. At this moment, he was startled as he looked in the direction of the Fenghua Palace. 20,000 streams of righteous energy still covered the sky. However, at this moment, under Zhong Shou's pure white king energy, it wasn't as strong as before, sweeping away all evil and suppressing everything. This is the outcome you wanted? Zhong Shou stood proudly in the air. He first took in a deep breath before he sighed. Although his gaze was wandering, he was looking straight ahead. However, Zhu Xi clearly knew that Zhong Shou's words were directed at him. It's a pity that the heavens don't bless you. I am lucky to be unharmed by the divine firmament core seeking lightning. As Zhong Shou said this, he looked into the sky at the 20,000 streaks of shaking righteous energy. His eyes were filled with mockery. On the other hand, don't you feel ashamed? Awe-inspiring righteousness is born from the heart. Study hard, understand the ways of the world, understand the principles of the world. Therefore, he could guard his heart and hold on to the Tao, nurturing the righteousness in his chest. However, today, do you dare to say that you have a clear conscience? While he was speaking, the dragon roar and phoenix cry became increasingly powerful and clear. Under the impact of the pure white king qi, traces of black spots actually appeared within the vast white king qi. It was like a piece of white paper that had been dyed in water, revealing the filth within. Zhong Shou instantly broke into a laugh and shook his head. So, all of you aren't perfect in terms of morals and righteous people. In fact, he also had his own selfish desires and desires. He had also done evil things before. Since that is the case, then what right do all of you have to ask others to be pure and good, to follow the Confucian faction rules and morals? As they say, if you don't want to, then don't force it on others. Let me ask all of you, have you truly done that? In just an instant, another few thousand streams of righteous qi spread out. Either they were too emotional and couldn't maintain it, or they felt ashamed and retracted it. Zhong Shou's voice continued. To spread the Tao, to kill me, a ruler who has betrayed the Tao, you don't mind working with the demon faction, treating the 18 million people in the imperial city like dirt. Is this what your Confucian faction does? It is only because my actions, the policies of the state, have deviated from the principles of your Confucian sect. So, even if you sacrifice the lifespan of these 18 million people, you still want me to be killed, right? because in your eyes, Zhu Zi, the Confucian faction principles and the continuation of your reputation are far above the lives of these people? Zhu Zi, you think that the world can't escape from the word reason, that no matter how big the world is, it can't be bigger than the word reason. However, I don't know if what you are following is your own principles or the principles of the world. Zhu Zi's heart tightened, green veins popped up on his forehead. However, at this moment, he didn't know how to react. That was because the person within the Fenghua Palace was a saint ruler who was recognized by the heavens and earth. So, no matter what Zhongsho said, he was right. No matter how Zhu Zi retorted, it was useless and powerless. What's more, was his persistence really the right thing to do? The moment such a thought rose up, Zhu Zi's spiritual sense started to shake. It wasn't just his Tao foundation that was shaking. Even the righteous qi outside his body was also showing traces of black qi. It wasn't as majestic as before. So even you, Zhu Zi, can't do that. Your heart has unspeakable thoughts, your body has desires that can't be suppressed. You have done things that you regret for the rest of your life, and you can't follow your own principles. Is this what you meant by upholding the heavens and destroying people's desires? In terms of being magnanimous, you aren't as good as my brother. Along with his words, everyone noticed Jin Buhui. That dignified and righteous aura was also pure white and clean, without the slightest bit of impurity. At this moment, it was far better than Zhu Shi and the 30,000 Confucians in the imperial city. Only Jin Buhui was still at a loss, not knowing what had happened. Zhongsho laughed coldly, retracting the mocking intent in his words. He said calmly, "Since all of you aren't properly dressed, how can you be righteous? How can you educate the people? Do you dare to say that the Confucian faction is the true path of heaven and earth?" A simple sentence caused Zhu Zi in the Confucian temple to explode. Vital energy surged in his chest, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. It was caused by his essence blood and was purple gold in color. At this moment, Zhu Zi's aura was gray and he was close to dying. At this moment, within the imperial city, all the Confucian temples, Imperial College, Censorate, and Hanlin Academy had their faces turned pale. All the Confucian scholars' faces were ashen white. 20,000 feet away from the Imperial Reading Room, Qing Xian was also at a loss as he looked on. After a long while, he said with a stunned expression, "This Zhu Shi is finished. Unless the Gone Emperor or another saint appears, the Confucian faction is destined to fall. No matter whether this Zhongsho lived or died, it wouldn't change the fact that the Confucian faction was about to fall. That was because today, the teachings that the Confucian faction had stuck to for 16,000 years were totally shaken by Zhongsho. That was because he was the saint of the world. Naturally, the saint path wasn't wrong. Tai Huang was thinking about the reason within. A moment later, he frowned. Is it because of Taisher's black qilin? As long as he subdues it, there is a chance of the black and white good and evil. However, even with the unlimited beginning and end ability, he shouldn't be able to do that, unless there was a higher-level Great Tao Divine Law as a medium. Is Zhongsho's foundation not the unlimited beginning and end? Xiufu listened on from the side and couldn't help but squint. If it was purely the unlimited beginning and end, naturally, he couldn't cause the good and evil qilins to coexist. Then, what other secrets did Zhongsho have? Qing Xian knew what Tai Huang meant. If the lips were gone, the teeth would be cold. Taoist and Confucian faction had worked together for 10,000 years, and once one fell, the other would definitely find it tough. However, even if he knew what he meant, Qing Xian still shook his head. This method is useless. So what if Zhu Zi knows the secrets within? People will only think that this is the will of the heavens. If not, why would there be the God Cloud path seeking lightning? Why would there be a black and white qilin protecting him? He and his body are all protected by the heavens. Tai Huang sucked in a cold breath. Speaking of which, we have to kill this Zhong Shou? I'm afraid that those 30,000 Confucian scholars will become enemies with us. Qing Xian smiled bitterly. To the Taoist faction, that was really the case. They definitely couldn't allow Zhong Shou to leave the imperial city alive. However, to Zhu Zi, no matter what, the Confucian faction had to protect Zhong Shou's life. As long as Zhong Shou was still alive and the saint was still alive, then everything would be corrected and they would have a chance to prove themselves. However, if Zhong Shou died, then everything would be settled. The Confucian faction would be split up. In the eyes of the world, Zhu Zi, the Confucian Temple, and even the White Deer Cave Academy would only be seen as the culprits who killed the truly loyal subjects and colluded with the demonic cultivators to kill the living sage. Anyway, let's act according to the situation. Qing Xian's gaze was really solemn. At this moment, the god item that could allow Li Bieshue to form the Dao and Shufu beside him weren't important anymore. His Majesty, the Shang Emperor, probably wants to kill this child even more than we do. However, when he said those words, Qing Xian could see from the corner of his eyes that Shufu still had a smile on his face. His heart sank and he couldn't help but think about it. Just what was Su Fu relying on for him to be so confident? At this moment, in the imperial reading room, Yin Yu's face was dark and sunken like a dead person, extremely ugly. He looked at the vast pure white king energy and the dragon and phoenix shadows that roared. Yin Yu's eyes were filled with uncontrollable jealousy and rage. Saint Ruler? Saint Ruler? Then, what was Yin Yu? An evil ruler? At this moment, the one who felt the most eye-piercing was still Jin Buhui. Righteous energy shone in the sky. Pure and upright, looking down on the heaven and earth with a clear conscience. It caused all the 30,000 Confucians to feel ashamed of themselves. It also caused Zhu Zi to dim in comparison. This was loyal and pure, a pure Confucian that was close to the saint ruler. Then, if his act of killing a loyal official wasn't violent, then what was? Zhuoxin's face was ashen white, his hands and feet were ice cold. His heart clenched tightly and nearly stopped beating. The one who was wrong was him, the teacher, and not Jin Buhui, the disciple. One could pretty much foresee that from today on, all the Confucian faction disciples would see him as a traitor who framed loyal people. He would be an enemy and his reputation would be lost. How could this happen? How could this happen? Yin Yu was the first to react. Grand Teacher, please help me kill this evil. This is what I should do. Li Bieshue replied coldly. However, when he looked at Zhong Shou whose injuries had healed, his eyes were filled with annoyance. This Confucian faction Zhu Zi really couldn't do anything right. Originally, Zhong Shou was heavily injured and on the verge of death. Now, not only were his injuries healed, but his cultivation also increased. He needed to spend a lot of effort and waste a lot of time. The key was that unlimited beginning and end ability, grade 13 supreme ability, which was really problematic. However, at this moment, he saw the relief on Zhong Shou's face as well as that cold killing intent. Then, the 12 copper men behind him suddenly moved and punched at the same time. Chapter 12:12. A full 12 giant fists smashed down towards Zhong Shou. At the start, Li Bieshue didn't care much. The 12 copper men were all peak Saint Realm experts. Even if they couldn't go up against the unlimited beginning and end ability, when they worked together, they could even kill an initial end realm Saint Venerable. Emperor Yuanchen hated Zhong Shou to the extreme and didn't care about anything else. At this moment, within the imperial reading room, Yin Yu felt his heart turn cold and sink to the bottom. The actions of the 12 copper men were all done on their own and weren't controlled by him. When he tried to connect with them with his spiritual sense, he noticed that there was no reaction. He was unable to enter the core of the copper men and was blocked out by a layer of barrier. That doesn't seem right. 200,000 feet out, Qing Xian frowned. He instinctively felt that it wasn't right and found it a little weird. Tai Huang stepped forwards and a sharp glow appeared in his eyes. What is going on? Xu Fu laughed. His expression was one of relief. It had finally begun. At this moment, he was going to witness the death of a peak end realm saint venerable. No! At this moment, Li Bieshue was also on guard. Suddenly, a gust of cold air rose up from his back, directly invading his mind. It caused his limbs to turn cold and his soul to tremble. He instinctively gave up on Zhong Shou and turned his attention to the area behind him. Then, he saw the 12 golden hoops shrouding him. The laws were in a mess, instantly causing his soul and Tao to be separated. Their connection was lowered to the extreme. Vital energy surged and his cultivation was pulled down from end realm. Then, the 12 giant fists changed their trajectory in an orderly manner and locked onto his aura. What is going on with the 12 copper men? Li Bieshue's chest was filled with shock and rage. All of a sudden, he thought that Qing Xian and Tai Huang were colluding with Yin to steal the wings. However, in the next moment, he realized that no matter if it was Saint Yuan Jing or Wei Su, they were all shocked. Their auras rose. End realm intense covered the sky once more. His gaze was ice-cold and filled with killing intent. No, it was Zhong Shou. The 12 copper men had fallen into the hands of Zhong Shou and Song Xingdao. Fulling sword formation, void divine technique. The great Tao has changed, the 12 copper men are above. Outside the imperial capital, the Kenzo sect master's voice sounded again. Without an end realm saint venerable there, the 9 heaven 10 earth Yin vein spirit slaughtering formation was nothing to worry about. Zhu Zi was severely injured, and the righteous qi of the 30,000 Confucian scholars collapsed one after another. At this moment, the entire fulling sword formation could be used to change laws. It caused Wushang Yuan Demon's emptiness god art to drop in grade. It also increased the effects of the 12 copper men's chaotic god technique to the extreme. It was better than the emptiness god art. Li Bieshue was originally half a step to end realm, but in just a moment, he was suppressed once more. The chaotic god rings pressed him down to intermediate saint realm. How did this happen? How did the 12 copper men fall into Song Xingdao's hands? What was Yin doing? Could it be that he was eating shit? Rage and fear mixed together. Li Bieshue was furious. He wasn't as elegant as before. He was filled with unwillingness and hatred. So what if it was the 12 copper men? Even if he fell to Saint Realm, Li Bieshue wasn't someone normal Saint Realm could compare to. With his soul resting on the Tao, even the 12 copper men couldn't totally tear it apart. His body flashed and Li Bieshue was thousands of feet in the air. However, it stopped there. Runes flashed on the arms of those giant fists. Then, the entire spacetime was completely locked down. The speed of the fists increased by several times, not as clumsy as before. They struck ferociously. Void divine technique. Li Bieshue couldn't dodge, and could only take it head-on. He was unable to remove the giant hand that was as strong as a god treasure. He could only turn a large portion of the fist strength into nothingness. However, after the first punch, the second punch immediately followed. It was like a giant hammer smashing down mercilessly. A loud explosion caused the ground to shake. Each time Li Bieshue took a strike, his body would sink 1,000 feet. Blood seeped out from his mouth. If his body wasn't an end-realm body, it would have been smashed to pieces by the strength of the 12 copper men. When he punched out the fourth time, Yuan Jing silently appeared behind him. 8,000 years ago, Brother Bieshue participated in the battle to kill my senior brother Shi Zi. Because of this, you ran around many worlds to call for friends. Did you think that there would be a day when you would be sealed by Song Xingdao in the cloud world? Another fist, there was a loud explosion. Li Bieshue's expression changed and blood seeped out from his orifices. His entire body was smashed into the ground by the heavy fists of the copper men. Xian Heaven Spirit Changing Technique? You bitch. The Xian Heaven Spirit Changing Technique changed his void energy illusionary god technique. It was unable to remove the strength of the copper fist, and just one fist caused him to be heavily injured. All of a sudden, Li Bieshue understood. So that was the case. Xiuguan didn't return to the cloud world at all. Long Ying and Xian Shuang also didn't return. You all made up such rumors just to calm me down. You are relying on these 12 copper men? So what? You are the one who is too stupid. Lin Xianjing scoffed. Her eyes were filled with excitement and a cold, mocking expression. She just needed to stay close to him and not do anything else. She just needed to use the Xian Heaven Spirit Changing Technique to change Li Bieshue's Void God technique. If Li Bieshue was still at peak End Realm, she definitely wouldn't be able to do that. However, at this moment, the difference in realm between the two of them was reversed. However, he was able to easily suppress it. Today, even if it's just me and Wei Su, do you think you can escape from this inescapable net? Countless green wooden vines spread out. Among them, strands of dark green silk stretched out and entangled Li Bieshu. Usually, the moment it got close, it would be dissolved by his void energy. However, at this moment there was nothing he could do. A huge sword light swept across the sky at the same time. It was the Heaven Path sword power that surged over like a river. It was really majestic, forcing away Zhu Zi's spiritual sense and causing the remaining righteous energy to scatter. It was also swept away by the spirit-slaughtering Godlight and unveil evil power. It was really majestic, bringing along the unveil spirit-slaughtering technique to lock down the entire Fenghua Palace and Imperial City. Zhong Shou used his sword art and his eyes lit up. Senior brother, you can kill him first. Wei Su laughed and used the mirror image technique to activate the one origin beginning and end sword. Surprisingly, he didn't stab towards Li Bieshue but Tai Huang, who was 200,000 feet away. The sword shadow flashed and Tai Huang's head flew into the air. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.